Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Misad Bulletin. And we shall start with our headlines. Blast in northern Syria kills at least 18. Egyptian forces kill 12 suspected militants in Sinai. And moving on to our details, starting with the Syrian profile. Syrian opposition activists say an explosion in the country's north has killed at least 18 people and wounded many others. The opposition-run Syrian Civil Defense said the blast occurred on Sunday in the village of Sarmada near the Turkish border and killed and wounded dozens. It also collapsed a 5-story building, burying many of the victims. From another perspective, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights put the death toll at 18. The observatory also said an arms depot in the basement of the building had detonated. It added that the depot was run by an arms dealer close to the Al-Qadha Levant Liberation Committee. On to Amman, Jordanian search teams pulled the bodies of 3 suspected militants from the rubble of their hideout, according to a government official on Sunday. The chain of events in Jordan began on Friday when assailants detonated a homemade bomb under a police car guarding a music festival in the predominantly Christian town of Hayes. Security forces chasing the suspects zeroed in on a multi-story building in the town of Salt near Hayes and attempted to storm it late Saturday. But the suspects holed up inside and opened fire and set off powerful explosions, and a wing of the building collapsed. Officials also said that 5 suspects are in custody. In Egypt, Egyptian security forces have killed 12 suspected militants in raids on their hideouts in North Sinai, the latest in a campaign to uproot armed militants behind a wave of violence in the area. State news agency MENA reported on Sunday that security forces came under fire when they raided a walled compound in El Arish, the capital of North Sinai province. It also said the raiding forces responded in kind and 12 suspected militants were killed in the shootout. Moreover, it reported that 5 rifles, 4 of them automatic guns, were recovered from the scene, as well as some ammunition and 2 ready-to-use bombs. Meanwhile, in Africa, Burkina Faso State TV reports that 5 Gender arms and 1 civilian have been killed between the rural communes of Bungo and Ugaru in the nation's far east. It reports the vehicle hit an explosive device late Saturday while Gender arms were escorting mining workers to their extraction site. Moreover, the governor said his eastern territory was under threat by young men who had received extremist training in Mali and have now returned to launch a katiba or brigade. This comes as Islamic extremists are moving to the region where they can hide in the thick forested areas and are launching more attacks on security forces. In Mali, Malians are voting on Sunday in a second-round presidential election to determine if Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta will remain in office in the West African nation as he faces off against opposition leader Somalia Sias. Sunday's polls open to light rain and light turnout. It's worth mentioning that nearly 43% of voters made it to the polls last month, and despite the relatively low turnout, officials called the vote well conducted. Still, a second term for Keïta seems likely. He received 41.7% of the vote in the first round, while Sias placed second with nearly 18% of the vote. On the other side of the world, police in Manchester say 10 people have been hospitalized as a result of a shooting after a Caribbean carnival in the city. Greater Manchester Police said the injuries range from minor to major, but most don't appear to be life-threatening. The shooting was reported about 2:30 a.m. Sunday. From another aspect, the detective superintendent said police are trying to establish exactly where this incident took place and who is responsible for such a dangerous attack. She added that extra officers will be on patrol to ease the concerns of residents. On another side, Indonesian search and rescue teams found 8 victims and 1 survivor after a small plane crashed in the eastern province of Papua. Police officials said on Sunday the demonium-aired passenger plane carrying 9 people, including a 12-year-old child who survived, lost contact with air traffic control on Saturday afternoon and was later found by local residents in Peganangan, Bintang district. Meanwhile, the child suffered broken bones and was being treated at the hospital. And going to our economic news, leaders of the 5 countries along the Caspian Sea have signed a convention aimed at ending decades-long uncertainty over exploitation of its resources. The agreement signed on Sunday in Akto, Kazakhstan by the presidents of Russia, Iran, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan establishes rules for declaring each country's territorial waters and fishing zones. But the issue of how the seabed, which contains rich oil fields, will be delineated between the countries remains subject to further negotiations. Noteworthy that the legal status of the Caspian Sea, the world's largest inland body of water, had been unresolved since the 1991 collapse of the Soviet Union. And finally, V.S. Naipaul, the Trinidad-born Nobel laureate, whose precise and lyrical writing in such novels as A Bend in the River and A House for Mr. Biswas made him one of the world's most admired and contentious writers, died at his London home at the age of 85. It's worth mentioning that Naipaul's fiction and non-fiction reflected his personal journey from Trinidad to London and various stops in developing countries. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2001 for having united perceptive, narrative and incorruptible scrutiny in works that compel us to see the presence of suppressed histories. And before ending our news, let's take another look at the most important headlines for today. Blast in northern Syria kills at least 18. Egyptian forces kill 12 suspected militants in Sinai. And we reached the end of our Misa bulletin for today. Thank you for joining us and see you tomorrow in a new bulletin.